So what we have here is a combination of a wall and a base of a chimney. So at one time there would have been a chimney right here where all these rocks are. It was probably, this is the base of it, so it was probably built with bricks, the chimney part. And then this is a continuation of a wall. So there would have been a wall right across here. And what we think is there was basically a 16 by 16 foot house right in here. This was one of the sections of the house. So it's a very large building that was built in sections at different times. And down in this pit right here, you can see where it goes down into the underlying clay. So this whole area is underlain with clay subsoil. And what they did was, archaeologists call this a borrow pit, which is basically a place where you take clay out to either build a chimney, make bricks, or whatever you're going to do with clay. Clay is a nice stable soil. So what they did here is they took clay out and they basically built this area up because it's wet. So where the house is, they put down about 2 feet of this clay. So they took it out, and then you have this big hole. So this was filled in with all kinds of debris, bricks, so lots of artifacts, bottle glass, and architectural things like nails and other things. So, and we think by the types of artifacts found, it's probably post 1860s. So it's probably related to the construction of the cellar that I'll show you in a minute. So within this pit, one of the interesting things we found was a spoon that has initials HEK on it. And that stands for Hannah Elizabeth Kilbourne, who was the wife of Paul Powell, Thomas Powell's son. And so we know that they didn't get married until sometime between 1860 and 1865. So we know that these artifacts had to be post that date because she wasn't living here until after 1860. But it's an interesting artifact because it tells a personal story. Usually what you have are bottle glass, ceramics, other things that people would purchase. But in this case, it's something that's directly related to an individual, so it's a very important and personal object. One of the things that archaeology can tell you also, by carefully excavating, you can see how this building was built. They took, some of it's mortared, some of it's dry laid. In other words, there's not mortar in between the stones. These are all local stones that they built the foundation, and then this would have had a wooden superstructure on top of it. And if you look at this right here, I'll point this out. There's a slight difference between this and this right here. So we think this is probably an earlier, the building that I pointed out earlier, the 16 by 16 foot building ends about right here, and then they've added on to it. So there's a different construction between this and that. And then this whole thing, what they would do is they'd lay a layer of stone down on top of the clay and then build the foundation on top of that. So we really have a good idea of how this this building was built, and it's a great example of vernacular architecture for this area. And it's really we know that it was built by Thomas Powell probably sometime between 1808 and 1820. And so you're really looking at in this section, you're looking at probably an earlier building. This is probably post 1860. So you're looking at the work of the Powell family as their fortunes changed throughout the 19th century, and they added on and their family grew and so on. Looking at the architecture physically tells you something about the family. And then So as I said, this was a smaller 16 by 16 foot building, and then they added on to it. So you can see there's a foundation wall here. So this is what archaeologists, the first thing you do is you kind of look out at the land and see what things you can see. And this is the back side of the building. So the front would have been over there. At some point, they added on to this a large cellar, which is now filled with water. The worst part about this in terms of preservation is the trees, because the trees get into the roots of the trees, get into the stone foundation, and they start breaking it apart. So that's the first thing we really want to get rid of, in addition to the water, is the trees. Get the tree roots, the active tree roots out of here to preserve what remains. And it's very well preserved right now in terms of the archaeology.